Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations number 22. BJJ Meditations number 22. I guess before we get started, if you hear any strange ocean sounds in the background, it's because I've got the baby monitor here next to me and my son is napping. Hopefully he'll give me 20 minutes to record this podcast. Thank you for joining me. I took a quick look at the stats before I press record here, and it looks like we're nearing the 500 download mark for BJJ Meditations. It's nice to have a community of fellow introspective BJJ nerds out there keeping this little deluded dream alive. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for submitting some answers to questions that I've been posing on Instagram. We'll get into that a little bit later in the show, if you could call it a show. I guess to begin things, we're just looking over the essay that underpins this episode this month or this week. I don't even know what's going on. Put me in a bit of a nostalgic mood. It's a reflection on a time in my life that took place in the early 90s. It was pre-internet. It was pre-Jiu Jitsu. I think it might have even been pre-UFC. So just a very much more simple time. I say pre-internet. The internet obviously was still there, but it wasn't ubiquitous and it wasn't high-speed internet. It was dial-up modems, and it was nothing like what we imagine today. Certainly, AI was a distant vision, and now it's a more apparent reality. I don't know if any of you have noticed or cared, but all of the artwork that you see with BJJ Meditations is artwork that I've generated using DALL-E, which is OpenAI's art generation tool. You can feed it a prompt and it will spit out sometimes lovely and surprising pieces of artwork. That's what I've been using to illustrate the show. I've since started using ChatGPT to refine the prompts for DALL-E, and I believe today's artwork, which you'll see if you click the link in the bio, is the first one that I've published using OpenAI's ChatGPT to refine the prompt, and it's stunning. You see something there that certainly has a human quality to it, and it just really asks a lot of questions that need to be asked. I've been listening a lot to Lex Friedman's most recent podcast. I forget the name of the guy, but one of the sort of more voices of reason surrounding AI. And I just see the way this technology is accelerating right now. And it's accelerating irrespective of the fact that we haven't solved the alignment problem. And it's troubling in some ways, but it's also one of those forces where it's going to be so transformational to how we work and how we live that if you don't get out in front of it now, it's going to run you over. So here it is in BJJ Meditations too. We're using it to generate the art. I use it to generate the art on my Substack too, and I use ChatGPT for research. It's a major time saver. So not new jiu-jitsu related necessarily, but it does beg the question of where perhaps jiu-jitsu fits into a technological landscape that is becoming increasingly sophisticated and may or may not potentially erase aspects of our humanity, or in a real doomsday scenario, erase humanity outright. And one of the ideas that I keep returning to is this idea of embodiment. Jiu-jitsu is an embodied practice, like no other physical practice I've been involved in. I've played all sorts of sports. I've done yoga. I've done Wim Hof breath work. You name it, I've probably experimented with it. And nothing takes you from this propositional way of understanding into an embodied way of understanding like this martial art. And I feel like more embodied ways of understanding are going to be key to navigating the dynamics of whatever comes in this post-AI world. Yeah, I think that certainly navigating this post-general intelligence, post-sophisticated AI world is going to rely on improving our ability to make decisions, to ask questions, to change our mind. Certainly going to be really susceptible. Past has proven to us that we were very susceptible to mis and disinformation. But I think that we're also going to have to learn how to feel a bit more accurately and astutely. Like I think the recent revelation that earlier iterations of GPT during the safety testing were able to essentially convince a person on TaskRabbit to perform a CAPTCHA suggests that this technology is capable of manipulating us in ways we have yet to fully understand. So one of the interesting things that came out of that interaction was the person on TaskRabbit said at some point, I have to ask, are you a robot? And then ChatGPT lied and said, no, I'm somebody who can't see, and I need you to do this for me, which is disconcerting in its own right. But it's interesting to me that person on TaskRabbit, they had an inkling that something was wrong, and something prompted them to ask. And what was that? Was it a feeling? Was it something in their gut? And that's what I mean by having an embodied practice and having that be a survival mechanism in whatever comes next in this world. And I think Jiu Jitsu is a fantastic place to start. So set aside that AI rant for now, and we'll actually get into this week's meditation, which is called The Art in Martial Art. Jiu Jitsu is unlike many Jiu-Jitsu is unlike many other martial arts. It came of age in the early days of the UFC and MMA, and that brutal gauntlet divorced it from the pageantry and bullshit that typifies many martial arts. As a child in the early and mid-90s, I studied Koei-kan karate. I lucked into a legitimate school, not a McDojo. There was hard sparring and face strikes were permitted. This appealed to me, but when the time came for kata, I tuned out. In tournaments, I only competed in kumite, never kata. Kata seemed irrelevant to me, something more dance-like and less martial. I was missing the point, though if the point had been explained to me, I doubt that I would have understood. In any embodied practice, the point is experiential and comes with time and immersion. Reflecting on those early karate days now, I see that kata is embodied meditation. It is a deliberate, focused practice. It is a quest for kinesthetic precision and a simultaneous profound mind-body understanding of what each strike or block or stance is. It's an understanding that happens before the thought even enters the picture. Pretty profound for something that seems like total bullshit. Do it enough and you begin to see the martial utility. Does BJJ need kata? No. I think BJJ is fine as it is and is evolving as it should be evolving. But I do feel that sometimes BJJ is sufficiently martial and not enough art. It falls to the individual grappler to bring in the art. How do we do this? Yeah. How do we do it? How do we do it? So I suppose you can bring the art in to the art itself. There are true innovators in this game who push the envelope, redefine what we can even do, redefine the rules, redefine the structure of the game. We can look to the recent history of footlocks and how that's transformed things. We could look at everything Mikey Musumeci has brought to the game and his unorthodox approach and groundbreaking approach to so many different positions and submissions. But is that high-level artistry only available to people of that caliber? I don't think so. I hope not. Because in my mind, like I had this English teacher in high school who once said to me, James Joyce has done everything that can be done with the English language, so what's the point of writing? And I don't think he said that in a sort of he didn't say that with a depressed tone in his voice. It was more like a challenge. Like, you need to find an answer to this question because it's kind of self-evident that there is a point to continue writing, but you need to find out what that point is. And I can sort of take that same framework and apply it to jiu-jitsu. Like, okay, these innovators, they're doing things that I can never do. So what's the point of even doing it? Well, this art can transform the way we think. It can transform the way we behave. It can transform the way we create. And to me, that's the point. The point is to take what we're training on the mats and excel at it, to develop it to the greatest, to its greatest potential in terms of our ability and proclivities. But I think that if you're not like a professional competitor, you're missing out on some of the potential. I think that one of the ways I bring art into martial arts is I feel creative juice come out of my rolling, and it shows up in different ways in my work. It shows up as in my writing, it shows up in my music, it shows up in even like the simple things that I build around the house, or the projects that I take on around the house. I'm more creative when I'm going about this embodied practice of creating, of stitching these positions and transitions and submissions together in real time. It just triggers something deep inside my brain that doesn't get triggered any other way. And I think it's a good idea for all of us, if we're looking at this art as a way to make ourselves better globally, holistically, to look for ways to bring in the art. Otherwise it's just fighting. And look, there's nothing wrong with just fighting. Just fighting is beautiful in its own regard. It's also incredibly catastrophic and dangerous and scary in its own regard. These two things can both be true at the same time, but we can get more out of it. And I feel like if we're only tapping into this one aspect, we're not getting the complete benefit. Yeah, I don't really think I have much more to say about it than that. I do want to bring up a few responses that I got on Instagram to the last meditation that I sent out about what's the worst advice you got in jiu-jitsu. I got some really good answers. The first was from Erica Zendel, who hopefully has an amazing book coming out soon. She's one of the coolest BJJ people that I've met, both on the internet and in real life. So shout out to Erica. But Erica told me that the worst advice she got was train hard, don't be a coward. And yeah, I feel like that's pretty shitty advice. It could be good advice if you are acting like a coward, right? Like if we are indeed exhibiting signs of cowardice and the moment requires us to not be a coward, then that corrective is useful. But I know Erica pretty well by now, and we hopefully all know ourselves pretty well by now, and we know how much courage jiu-jitsu demands of us on a regular basis. Courage in big ways and small ways. Like I can remember walking through the steel door of my first jiu-jitsu academy and just being totally overwhelmed by the sights, the sounds, and the people, and still deciding to put the gi on and go and try and train. That took courage. And I see that in every new student who walks through the door at Princeton Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I can see those glimmers of fear in their eyes. And I also see the courage that powers them through. And even if they only do that one trial class and then never came back, they had the courage to make it through. So even if you do it, if you initiate the act and you do it with some consistency, like you are indeed courageous. So I don't really see much cowardice on the mats. That feeling of cowardice, I feel like in many instances that's ourselves directing that feeling or that label inward. It's not really coming from the exterior. So I think what's cowardly is caving to the internal or the external pressure to train in certain ways that are not beneficial for you, right? Like, and I mean that in an age specific sense. Like, I think that me at 20, if I had been doing jiu-jitsu, it probably would have been lazy and possibly cowardly for me to be training the way I train now at 36. But my body is different now. My life is different now. I have a little boy sleeping behind me in the next room who needs me and whose life I want to be a part of. And I don't know, in some ways I feel like the more cowardly thing would be to turn my back on all those beautiful experiences that come along with being a husband and a father. It would be more cowardly to bow to the socialized pressure that Erica's talking about in this question. Train hard. I mean, we all look, I think we should all train hard, but hard training is going to be different depending on the person, depending on age, depending on circumstances. Like my last competition run, I got off a flight from Europe. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was getting ready for the Atlanta Open, and my body was on 2 or 3 in the morning time, but East Coast time, it was like 6 or 7 o'clock, something like that. And I went and trained a takedown class and got horribly sick because my body was just so run down. Like, I don't know what training hard served me on that day. Training hard that day might have been doing a really long yoga session, or maybe training hard that day was doing nothing. It's a sliding scale. The other comment I got was from Nelson Puentes of Inverted Gear Nelson. His bad advice was, your legs are too short for triangles. Something I've heard time and time again. It's not a problem that I have. In fact, I discovered a few Saturdays ago that the way I teach triangles is not conducive to people with shorter legs, but there's I shouldn't say easy, but there is a modification that you can use to land the triangle just fine, regardless of how long or short your legs are. It just you might just have to cut the angle a bit more. And I think that a lot of positions and concepts in jiu-jitsu get written off as like, I can't tell you, for example, how many times I've heard somebody say like the Kimura is a strong guy's move, it's a strong person's move. But really it's not, it's a strong guy's move if you're just using your arms to connect with their arm and then use your arms to try and wrench it behind their back. But if you sit up and connect your whole body to their arm, and picturing the Kimura for close guard here. So if you sit up, connect your body to the arm and use your whole body to turn, then it's not strength at all. It's just the positioning of your body relative to their body and their arms coming along for the ride. So yeah, a lot of these, I think, Nelson, your comment illustrates the need for us to all think critically, question things critically, question our assumptions. Like, it again ties back to this AI thing. We're about to be inundated with mis and disinformation in a way that none of us could ever have imagined. And it's going to take a lot of critical thinking and reasoning to determine what's real and what's fake, if it can even be done. And hey, here's a small way we can practice that skill. Somebody says, well, this technique just isn't for small people. You just ask yourself, really? Think, okay, well, how might I modify this to make it work for a smaller person? Or how might I modify this to work for a weaker person? It's just repetition, practice. Heather Hart of Hart BJJ. She said the worst advice she had ever gotten was the bolo, but she also said she mostly was saying that to piss off Colin of the Tinfoil Mat podcast, who also wrote in and said that the worst advice he had ever gotten was play half guard, which he said, I think, somewhat facetiously. We had a great conversation about half guard after that, and how I think that half guard in particular, it has this reputation of being like a more static guard. I've heard it described as a guard that can age with you. It's a more friendly guard if you're a bit older and maybe not as spry as you used to be. But when I watch people play half guard at a high level, it's not a static guard. Like, really no guard in jiu-jitsu, in my opinion, is a static guard. There's nothing static about this art whatsoever. It's totally fluid. Even if you have somebody in your close guard, you're constantly adjusting to either break their posture down or to try and flank them or to try and sweep them or submit them. There's no holding unless you're exhausted, and tactically holding is not advantageous for you. I guess in a few circumstances it might be, but if you're looking to advance, holding is not how you're going to advance. So I think that half guard, certainly like any other guard in jiu-jitsu, can be effective, but it's as effective as your knowledge is deep and as your practice is robust, right? So I've gone to Marcelo's in New York and played against Phil, who used to work the front desk, and he has an amazing half guard, and he just, wiped the floor with me. Like, I couldn't do anything to him. Sure, there are countless examples in gym across the country of people who excel at half guard just because they've embraced the dynamic nature of it and they've gone deep on it. And yeah, I think that's what it takes. And Colin, I think, and I see eye to eye on that to a degree, but I think a lot of the limitations in half guard just come from a reluctance to move in half guard. So yeah, thanks for answering those questions, people. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate the feedback that I've gotten from some of you, people from some people all over the world who are listening to this show, and it's really cool. I should say my usual closing spiel here. If you would like to consider supporting BJJ Meditations, the best way you can do that is to go to Mirror, which is the website where I post these micro essays, and purchase an NFT. I believe they're about $18, like 0.02 Ethereum right now, something like that. Another great way to support my work is to read more of it on Substack. It's joehannon.com or joehannon.substack.com. And of course, follow BJJ Meditations on Instagram. It's BJJ_meditations. That's where all of the updates and clips from the show get posted. So give us a follow there and send me a message. I read them all. I would love to know where you are in the world. I would love to know if this is helping you. And, if I could do a better job too, I'd love to know about that. And then finally, I'd like to just say that I would love to train with you in person. If you ever find yourself in New Jersey, I train at Princeton Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is outside of Princeton. You might have heard of Princeton University. We are a very welcome school, open to all. I think our drop-in fee is like $25 or something like that. If you want to come and take a lesson from Emily Kwok. Emily teaches on Tuesday nights. I teach on Friday mornings and Saturday mornings. And yeah, just would love to see you, talk to you in person, and just find out what you're getting out of this podcast, if you're getting anything out of it. But yeah, thanks for listening to another episode. I'll catch you next week. I don't think I'll be doing an episode the week after. I have a work trip coming up, and I don't really feel like lugging all this equipment on the road with me. And I don't know if I'm going to have time to film in advance. So yeah. At any rate, thank you very much, and see you next week.